closed captioning feature is only available for the downloaded version on Microsoft Teams. So let's begin with Seneca's land acknowledgement, followed by Humber's. Thank you.
Ani, sego, pegutit, niwe, kidme, Mompi, Ayong, Anishinaabeg, Asian Kwazant, Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, Mige, Windak, Pine, Kayat, Mompi, Ake.
Bojo, Wache, Eshaga Mompi, Williams Treaty, Ge.
Hi everyone, my name is Phil Leggett. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm the Interim Manager of Advising Services for Humber College. And I'm very excited to pass it over to Kara Naviu, who will do the Humber land acknowledgement.
Ani, hello everyone. Like Phil said, I'm an Indigenous peer mentor at Humber College, and so I'd like to acknowledge that Humber College is located within the traditional and treaty lands of the Mississaugas of the Credit, known as Etobicoke, the place of the Black Alders in Michigan-Saugee language. The region is uniquely situated along the Humber River watershed, which historically provided an integral connection for Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Wendat peoples between the Ontario Lakeshore and the Lake Simcoe, Georgian Bay regions, and now home to people of numerous nations. Etobicoke continues to provide a vital source of interconnection for all.
All right, thank you, Kara. And I'm also equally excited to be able to introduce our moderator for today's panel, Monique. Monique is a career strategist with the University of Toronto. Her portfolio includes supporting students from equity-deserving groups by equipping them with the tools they need to effectively strategize towards their careers of choice. She brings to her current role a wealth of experience and knowledge. Most recently, Monique was the coordinator for student diversity and inclusion initiatives with Humber College, providing oversight to a Black-centered equity hub called The Base. She has over 16 years of experience working with marginalized communities within the educator and community development sector. Welcome, Monique, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Phil. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. Today, we are going to be talking about career resiliency. I'm excited about it. And it's going to be framed around providing tools and strategies for students, particularly from equity-deserving groups. And when we use this term, equity-deserving groups, we're referring to communities who were historically and who are currently underserved and underrepresented. And so these groups include women, persons with disabilities, racialized persons, persons from diverse gender identities, and persons who identify as 2S LGBTQ+. We have a great panel, we've got a great panel today that's going to be sharing their experiences as well as their expertise. And so at this time, I'd like to take the opportunity to introduce each and every one of them. So our first guest or our first panelist is Dr. Elaine Brown Spencer, who is an educator of equity, social work, and Black studies. Welcome, Dr. Spencer. Our next panelist is Laura Gagnon, who is a member of Doki's First Nation in Northern Ontario and Director of Wellness Innovation for Shikabe Makwa at the Center for Addiction and Mental Health. Welcome, Laura. Our next panelist is Ojo Ikalo, who is the Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, as well as Talent Acquisition. Welcome, it's great to have you. Ojo, I want to make sure that I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Am I saying it correctly?
Not quite, it's Ogo. It's a pleasure to be here today.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm happy that you've corrected me. And it's great to have you as well, Ogo. Thank you. Next, we have Rosie. Menza, who is a Toronto-based registered dietitian, consultant, and food justice activist. Welcome, Rosie. It's great to have each and every one of you. Again, I'm excited just to go into a deeper dive into this conversation around career resiliency. So let's get started. I want to start with you, Dr. Spencer, if possible. I want you to share a little bit about yourself and how you define career resiliency. And you will have to unmute yourself.
I didn't want to be the one to say, oh my gosh, I'm muted. Thank you very much for having me here today. And to start it off, because as I was reflecting on career resiliency, I think resilience has a lot to do also with overcoming and the challenges that come with the different patterns of work and career and what you want to do and sometimes where you end up. And for me, resilience is also about knowing who you are and what you want to become as a professional. I find that in the last 2 years, especially with the pandemic, it's really redefining what we find to be important. The resilience of doing work sometimes that, in my case, in the last couple of years, that's based on lived experience, that you also saw plastered on media in terms of the public execution of a gentleman, of which much of the EDI work has kind of exploded to what we see it now. And the resilience of overcoming challenges of work that reflects your lived reality. And so for me, I would also even say to students is sometimes is that where you want to go is not necessarily where you're going to begin with. And sometimes because of your, I call it calling, or the work actually calls you to it, you will soon learn how things just naturally unfold when you be the authentic self. And so resilience for me has, in the last couple of years, is really about, sticking with tough and challenging aspects to work that's been hugely publicly and politicized. And of course, I'm talking about equity, diversity, anti-Black racism, and all of that. Because I've shared phone calls with colleagues who were crying on the job, who were being very overwhelmed by the type of work that we're being asked to do, but then feeling morally obligated to continue because of what it meant for the next generation. I have more to say on that, but I don't want to take any more time from my fellow panelists. So,
yeah, we could really get into that, that last piece there. Thank you for sharing that. Sticking with the hard work, the work that's not just beneficial for you, but also, oftentimes when we talk about equity deserving groups, we're talking about the work that's going to be benefiting the next generation. Absolutely. What about you, Laura? Would you just, briefly introduce yourself and how you define career resiliency?
Sure. So miigwech for having me. Gaga Bidong Indigenous Cause, Doki Sindunjaba, Wajash Kundodam, Naswakmak Indunjaba, Nishnawbe Koyandao. So my name is Laura Gagnon. I'm a member of Doki's First Nation. I am located in the territory of Niswakmak, also known as Sudbury. And as in my introduction, I'm part of the Shkabe Makwa team at the Center for Addiction and Mental Health, where I have the great honor of being the Director of Wellness Innovation. I have a bit of an unconventional but really beautiful pathway through my education and career journey. And I think that what I've come to learn for me is that career resiliency has really come to be defined through the alignment of my entire being. And from that, I mean the alignment of my spiritual, emotional, physical, and mental wellness. And I think oftentimes that really is underestimated, how important how it is significant it is that those pieces are all in alignment. I think the other piece for me, career resiliency, also speaks to the relationships. There's a gentleman by the name of Rupert Ross who, really poignantly stated that relationships are what make, direct, unmake, damage, and reward us, and that you really can't know me without knowing something of knowing me in the context of my relationships. And so when I think about, again, career resiliency, it's really grounding ourselves in those relationships. the last piece I'll say without getting too far into it is I think it's about staying relevant, staying current, staying engaged in what it is that you're doing, and really learning to tap into that intuition. I'll leave it there for now.
Thank you so much, Laura. I love these little nuggets. Thank you so much. Ogo, what about you? Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you define career resiliency.
Thanks, Monique. So my name is Ogo Ikalo. Laura did such a beautiful job with the land acknowledgement that all I feel to say is I'm incredibly privileged to be a settler on this land. I'm out in Markham, which is under Upper Canada territory and treaty. So a blessing to be here. I'm currently the Director of Equity, Diversity, Inclusion, and Talent Acquisition with Hydro One. But started my career as a CBC journalist, did government, did nonprofit, did some corporations, and now I'm here after working with the Ontario Federation of Labor, which is the House of Labor and Union. So I have quite an array of information and background, and learned what career resiliency is. And for me, it's really, resiliency should be the goal, is what we all aspire to be. We can't really control the people around us. We can't control the events that surround us, but we can control the capacity to meet the challenges that inevitably arise at work, and focusing on resiliency as our goal rather than on trying to control what is uncontrollable. We put ourselves in a much healthier position to move forward. So that's my little nugget on that. Share the space with my other colleagues.
Thank you so much. Resiliency should be the goal. Instead of trying to control everything, leave what you can't control, right? And focus on the resiliency piece. Rosie, would you mind introducing yourself, telling us a little bit about you, some of the work you do, and how you define career resiliency?
Sure. It's a pleasure to be here with you all and to be able to speak to students, considering I was just a student a couple of years ago and just still navigating my career and just the early stages of it. But as you mentioned earlier, I am a registered dietitian based in Toronto, and a lot of my work is grounded in food justice. So really looking at ways we can dismantle systems of oppression that prevent people from having access to food and also having a good relationship with food. And a lot of my work is centered around changing the conversations within my profession, specifically dietetics, but in the healthcare system overall. A big part of the work, so I actually run my own business, and a lot of it started from my work, influencing on social media. So a big part of my work is social media and being online all the time. And it's quite exhausting, it's tiring, and it's difficult to, keep going when, you're getting so many different images or thoughts of what you should be doing versus what you actually want to be doing. And I think a big thing for me is not being afraid to pivot. That's a big part of resilience for me, and just understanding that I'm, evolving in my career. The things I'm learning are helping to shape my career, and sometimes that means things will look different and change. So a big thing for me has been being able to pivot, but like what was mentioned earlier, being authentic to myself and staying grounded in that.
Absolutely. I love that piece, right? Not being afraid to pivot. And my mind goes to also knowing when to pivot. I think that's a huge piece as well. And I think it kind of ties into what you were sharing, Ogo. I want to pivot a little bit to talk about self-care, because you mentioned, Rosie, around social media, right? And this is a little bit off topic, but I'll bring it back. I recently had my social media account hacked, and it sounds very minuscule, but it became a big deal. It was really stressing me out, and I actually shut it down. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because, you were sharing, you spent a lot of your time on social media doing a lot of the advocacy work, right, that you are engaged in. And I want to ask, how do you take care of your own mental health and well-being in your professional career or within the communities you work with? Because I know that being virtual, for one, just always being online, always doing the work of social media, like it takes a toll on you, right? And so how do you balance that, right? How do you take care of your own mental health, Rosie?
This is a really good question, and it's honestly something that I'm always trying to navigate and try new things. So one thing is just having boundaries on how you use it. And what I mean by that is even having like time limits on how you use different apps, or just knowing what you're going to engage with and what you're not. So really having those boundaries, which can be very difficult, but establishing them from early on can really help with managing your mental health. Because like I said, there's the whole point of these apps is to keep us on there. And if we don't have these boundaries, we will be on there for hours. So I would say definitely setting those time limits, and also just kind of checking in with myself, really noticing how you feel just being on these apps, and is it actually helping you towards your goals. So I think even just noticing those internal cues has been really helpful for me. But if I'm being honest, it's still something that I'm trying to navigate all the time. But I think just recognizing when it is impacting my mental health, and not being afraid to take a step back from it has been really, really helpful.
Absolutely. I think about myself. I shut down my social media account because I was tired of fighting with the hacker. And can I tell you, I feel so clear because I don't have access to social media. And that I realize is a boundary for me. I easily could get back on and engage in the fight again. But I don't want to, right? And so for me, that's a boundary for me in this season. And I feel really good. But boundaries aren't just, when it comes to social media or the virtual world, right? For boundaries look very different in different workplace settings. And so, Laura, I want to ask you, right, recognizing the importance of self-care, how do you find that balance, right? Like, how do you take care of your own mental health and well-being in your professional career or within the communities you work with?
That's a really interesting question for me. The irony is that I work in Shkabe Makwaza Center for First Nations, Inuit, and Métis Wellness, located at the Center for Addiction and Mental Health. And CAMH is one of 4 mental health hospitals in Ontario. And I think what's really ironic is, it's taken this pandemic for me to really realize how poor I've done at taking care of myself. I think what it's taught us is that, we really glamorize overworking, and we tend to wear, I'll say burnout, like this badge of honor. And I really struggle with that because, we have so many great social workers and so many folks who are eager to join our team and do this work. And I don't think this is an issue that's unique to me. I think that many people can resonate with what I'm saying. I think that, we can't negate the importance of sleep and a good diet and exercise, and really taking time to replenish ourselves with the people and the things that make us feel well. And so for me, it's been really important for me to stay connected to ceremonies, going back to the land. I'm really fortunate to be really connected to the land and my community. And my husband's from the same community. So we're often out doing things on the land, and we can't underestimate how significant that supports us in our wellness. I think for us too, I've learned through, especially again through this pandemic, that you really have to tend to your own work and take care of yourself and be really authentic with how you're feeling. I really want to encourage, being less generous with yeses and more intentional with where I put my time and energy every single day. And, I think that saying no has been a really powerful learning tool for myself this year, and understanding that I don't have to spread myself so thin to be successful. I can still have, a really nice work-life balance in being more careful with my yeses.
I love that. Can I just say, students, saying no is a huge power tool. It's like a gift to yourself. I wrote down, I have a calendar or an agenda, and I wrote down for the month of February, one of my career goals for the month of February was saying no. Like I literally had to write it out. And it was a gift for me, right? Because I had enough on my plate. And I think that's what you're saying. It's the importance of recognizing when you are at your max, when you don't want to do anything else more than what you currently are doing. It's about being intentional and choosing what you will do and do it well, right? For me, you mentioned that, sorry, go ahead, Laura.
I was just going to say, I think it's not even when we hit our max. That's part of the challenge. I think that if we don't say yes with authenticity, if we don't really mean that yes, in some way down the line, we end up resenting that yes. And I think that's what ends up leading to more problems. And so I don't think it's about, I have too much on my plate. It's, this doesn't replenish me or feel good or isn't congruent with my values. And I think that unfortunately, especially as new grads or people who are really eager to build their career, that sometimes we say yes with resentment. And we need to be more careful about that to protect our own space.
Absolutely. I love those questions. Those are great. Definitely saying yes to too many things can serve as setbacks or challenges. I would love for you to share a time, Dr. Spencer, when you experienced a major challenge or setback in your career, and how did you deal with the situation? What changed for you because of this experience?
Yeah, you know, when I think back, like I've been in the workforce for over 2 decades, let's just on it. But I kind of want to tie it into, I do want to just, before I talk about that incident, many incidents over my career, the notion about the resilience from the student perspective in our career, because resilience has a lot to do with this notion about being tough, or, you know, that capacity to recover quickly from difficulties. And, you know, resilience only really works if there's adequate recovery and supports to get through that difficulty. And the recovery is about being able to disengage from the constant stressors, as you mentioned, the yeses and so forth. And about your dignity and respect, you know, restoring oneself. That's really about what you'll learn throughout the path of your career. I always remembered being so gung-ho, finished university, told my friend, oh my God, I got this great job. I won't name the organization. I was super happy. And I said, oh my God, you got to apply. You got to apply. And they did. It's my really, really good friend. And he applied and he got the job. And he got the job and we're there, you know, feeling all nice and stuff. And then he told me how much he was getting paid. And how was it more than me? I mean, I was like, I told the guy about the job. We're in the exact same job and he's getting paid more than me. And I was just not having that 20 plus years ago, right? And it's also a friend, right, who developed, you know. And I had to really think really hard about that because it was like rising up in me with resentment. And I had to say, no, I got to be true to myself. And I actually took it to my manager. And I said, I feel like, and I used the language of pay equity and sexism, because he was a guy, I was a woman. And I said, like, we're doing the same job. And I knew it was risky because those days, you know, there's no unions, and I shouldn't say those days, but anyways, it was a nonprofit organization. And it was through the advocacy and taking that risk and you know, telling her how I felt about that. Within 3 months, they corrected it.
Wow.
And it became challenging and so forth because, you know, my first job, you know, a lot of times students, you know, you go out wanting to save the world. And then the world of work presents itself that's very inconsistent with what you've been taught in the classroom. And I always tell my students, it's 2 different worlds, right? And I remember being so stressed out on the job because later to find out that my manager and the director were in an inappropriate relationship. And there I was again. Now this is over 20 years ago, so no one can track this. And it was my first job, and I'm just like, I can't believe I'm gonna have to leave my first job because of something inappropriate I see happening and don't want to be a witness. And again, the same manager who I developed that rapport with because I had went to them about the salary discrepancy. I felt that kind of connection, safety, and I actually expressed to her and told her that I was going to be quitting because of what I was observing. And then I remember her exact word is, hold on, just give it one more day.
Oh, wow.
Long story short, it worked out. I ended up staying and then I moved on, eventually went to government. So sometimes the resilience is even about advocating for yourself to restore your sense of dignity, and respect. And it's going to come with all the belly rumbling. Should I do it? Shouldn't I do it? But at the end of the day, you'd be surprised that if you operate in authenticity and truth and honesty, it will work itself out. And so that's one thing I will share, because I know sometimes out the gates, you run out the gates, you get your degree, your diplomas, and you go to the world of work, and then you realize that is not what I thought it would be, right? But just have those individuals in your life that, and things kind of go awry, that you can check in with to know what your next move would be. And I'm so happy I did that. So as I reflect on that 25 years later, right, I think about that, how I still remember as fresh as it was then as it is now.
I think self-advocacy is a great tool. I think sometimes, especially when we talk about equity deserving groups, it's like I don't want to say undervalued, but it's underused. I'll say that. And one of the things I'm picking up from your story is that there is this connection between career resiliency and self-advocacy, right? In your words, Dr. Spencer, to restore your dignity and self-respect. And so, I want to reiterate that, like, there is power in being able to speak up for yourself about things that align with your value system, I think is what I'm hearing from the panel today, align with your value system and your career goals, right? Can you share with us, Ogo, about a time when you experienced a major challenge or setback in your career, and how did you deal with the situation? What changed for you because of this experience?
Oh, let me share. I think resiliency, what I learned, is not something that you can summit at will. It's something that you have to continue to build and work on every day. That came into play with me when I decided to have my first child. Keep in mind, I'm a woman, and then the intersectionality is being a woman of color. And there's something that our community calls the Black tax. It's Black for our community, but there's a tax in our FNMI community and many marginalized communities. It's that extra mile you have to go through to make sure that you remain at a competitive level with your Caucasian colleagues. So about a year or two before I decided to start my family, I was pulled in by my then people leader, advising me that there was a senior leadership position coming up within the organization I was at. They were gearing me up for it, prepping me up for it. I've been doing a lot of the work anyways. The person currently in the role was retiring. Fast forward about a year to 6 months before all of this was happening, suddenly there's a new Caucasian woman who joined the organization without much fanfare and without a job being announced, or she just kind of appeared one day and she was introduced to all of us. Great, we welcomed it. And suddenly they started promoting her and propelling her in the space that I was meant to take over. And I'm now pregnant. I'm now about 6 to 7 months pregnant. So I eventually go on mat leave and had the baby in December. Lo and behold, January, they post a job. First week of January, they post a job because I'm now on mat leave thinking I'm not going to apply. I apply, credentials are great, get wind that the leader has now gone to my union and is questioning my credentials for the job. I'm 6 months post-pregnancy, post-birth. So I now had to write a 24-page attestation to why I did not lie on my resume and everything that's there is true. So past that, so these are the barriers that were put in place for me not to get the job, because it was now clear that she wanted someone else to get it, but she couldn't say that. So interviews came about. Lo and behold, I'm the standout candidate. That interview was February. I remember having a sleepless night with a newborn. They set the interview at 8 o'clock in the morning and gave the other candidate the interview at 1. Just putting all the elements into play, so all the barriers into play, and then proceeded to deliberate over the job for many months, sat on it, because I heard later on that there was a lot of back and forth where the people who clearly wanted me and knew that I was the standard candidate were questioning why this leader was so adamant to pick the second person. So eventually I got the job and had to go back to work 6 months after 6 months into my mat leave because, again, the way it was presented is, well, fine, we'll give you the job. Are you taking it or not? And that was a moment of resilience. And that was a moment of, choice of, am I choosing what has always been my baby, my career? Am I choosing my baby now, my little baby, my family? And these are tough decisions. And what I had going for me was a strong support system, both at home and in the workplace, a great network of people and mentors and advisors who I talked a lot with, shared a lot of my concerns with. And then they helped propel me and say, you can do this. And we got your back. And we got your back at home. We got your back in the workspace. So you go and get it, girl. And I'm glad I did. And then, that's, I'll just kind of leave it at that and let you kind of be the judge of what I've shared. I mean, there are many sides to a story, but this is my encounter. And just don't give up, be persistent, and be wary of the many barriers that are going to be put before you, especially when you add an intersectional lens to who you are, who you identify as.
That is unbelievable, that story. Like, I cannot believe, I think the only thing that would make me feel a little bit better about it, if you were to tell me that, like Dr. Spencer, it was a 20-year ago situation. That's incredible.
I wish it was. This was more current. I would say this was a couple of years ago. Unfortunately, we're still fighting the fight. We're still navigating the barriers and challenges that are put in front of us by those who call themselves allies. So careful of that word allyship and what it means, and if it's performative or if it's authentic. Yes, but you must persevere, is what I'm going to say. We must be resilient.
Some people are debunking the term allyship.
Yes, and we need to.
I completely don't use that term anymore. Someone said you have critical friends. Better to have
100%.
What does that mean? What does that mean? Can you unpack that, Dr. Spencer?
Critical friends in terms of, you see, the thing about allyship, like when you're going through things like that in the workplace, we could put labels on it like anti-Black racism, where leaders, Black women or men, whoever, are going for positions that they're clearly qualified for, but the systemic barriers that are preventing them from getting those jobs. And then the so-called allies are the ones sometimes that are creating the barriers or not speaking up and not speaking out, right? And rather than labeling everyone as allies, it's like the proof is in the pudding, right? You do it or you don't. Critical friends are the ones that, like she said, having those support system, people that have your back. People are going to say, yeah, you're going to have to cut your mat leave short, but if you do it this way or that way, you know what I'm saying? And you feel safe with divulging what's going on with you and stuff like that. People who get it, who can see systems of power as they're working against you. And so you could be propped up to fight the fight. Because allyship is showing up. So I say, get rid of the word, do it, and you become the critical friend, right? So hopefully I unpacked that a little bit, Monique.
That was beautiful. Yeah. That was beautiful. Okay, so Ogo, how do you then promote resiliency and wellness within your organization, within your space, or when working with a team?
Oh, that's such a great question. I try to do it every day, and I try to empower my team. Mental health is a critical initiative for me. I've suffered from mental health issues for many years. I don't reveal that, actually. I'm surprised I'm revealing it in this space, but it's nothing I'm shy about. But I always promote it. So the first meet with my team recently was, if you need a mental health day, take it. I don't want you coming in and not being your best self at work. If you need some time, take it, because the work we do is important, but it's also contentious, it's difficult, it's emotionally draining. And I need you at your best, and I need you to be well as well. And also challenging my coworkers and my friends, my colleagues at work to be resilient and to learn to set boundaries. One that pops to mind really quickly was my colleague who, when we first started, he told me that every day at 7 o'clock, he shuts down and he has a touch point with his kids. It's this one thing he's always done. And then fast track 6 months into our new jobs, it started about a day apart. He no longer had those touch points. And I said to him, why not? That is your wellness. That is your check. Just take away the family side. That for you is where you build your resilience and your support. And he's like, oh gosh, just meetings. It's just too much. So by November, I kept asking him and probing him. And I said, I challenge you, starting January 1st, you need to go back to those touch points, because I'm seeing you now and seeing you when we started 6 months back, and seeing the toll that missing out on your children and missing out on that touch point with them is taking on you. So I'm pleased to report that come January 1st, he called me up. He's like, that's what I'm doing today. And he's managed to keep that up. He's managed to reset that boundary, because he knows it's not just important for his support and his family, but it's critical to his mental health and his performance at work, and being able to be resilient in the workplace and the work that he does.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for sharing that. Having wellness points is really important. What about you, Laura? How do you encourage or promote resiliency and wellness within your organization or when working with a team?
I love this question. I think it's something that we're really called upon to always keep ourselves in check as leaders. And, I have a brilliant team of people that I have a responsibility to support. And when I think about who they are and what they bring to the organization, I want them to be the best versions of themselves. I want them to be whole and healthy as a person. And it comes back to really having that sense of balance between their spirit, their emotion, their mind, and their body. And I think that providing an environment and holding each other and ourselves accountable to really staying in that point of balance. And so that's also my responsibility to model. That's showing that I'm disconnecting on the weekends, and that, I have 2 cell phones to keep really strong boundaries between what is my personal life and what is a work life. And I acknowledge the privilege that it is, to work in a company where I do have 2 cell phones, but it's setting boundaries within the parameters of what's available. I think that I recognize that my team all comes from this place where they bring these gifts and their purpose. They walk with those when they enter the doors of our organization or these virtual spaces. And I have a responsibility to understand those gifts and what their sense of purpose is. I have a responsibility to nurture and to support them and to help them to flourish. And so it's creating an environment where that's encouraged and prioritized. And so I have the great honor of working for someone like Dr. Rennie Linklater, who's just a phenomenal leader. And she's really helped me to understand that, empowered people empower people. And I really love that I get to hire people who are, they're more, they're remarkable. They're people who have achieved more and who have greater possibilities. And that doesn't intimidate me in any way, because I want to surround myself with people who inspire me and who challenge me to grow, and where we can all hold each other accountable to our wellness and growth. I think the last thing I'll say is, it's really also about acknowledging and celebrating and laughing together. Always. I think that praise doesn't have to sit just at the leadership level. I think that when you create a really balanced and empowered team, we have a responsibility to praise and celebrate all of the day-to-day achievements, the big, the small wins. They all really matter. And then supporting each other when there hasn't been a win or there's been a big downfall. I think entering into an organization, bringing that attitude of generosity. And our former CEO, Dr. Catherine Zahn's also a remarkable leader, as is our VP, Lori Spadorcha, just phenomenal people who have inspired me. But Dr. Zahn used to say, we need to be humble leaders and generous friends. And I've always loved that, because I think that attitude of generosity and helping people and creating this space is just the responsibility of us as leaders, who know that there are others who have come and gone before us, who have really paved the way and made space for us to sit at these tables and in these organizations.
Yeah, I think I love that, the point that you first of all share, that empowered people empower people, right? I love that piece. And the fact that I do agree with you in that I think as leaders, it's our responsibility to model what a healthy, balanced lifestyle, or at least, aiming in that direction, what that actually looks like, right? And I think that if we do have attitudes of generosity, that does spill down onto the team, right? I think that's number one, important, but I think it's they're gifts. It's you creating a healthy team, a healthy organization. Like, that's the proof, right? Dr. Spencer says the proof is in the pudding, right? I think that's the proof of a healthy team, when I can support you when you're low, or I can praise you when you're doing well, and I don't have to have a title to be able to do that. That's great. I want to ask you the same question, Rosie. How do you encourage or promote resiliency and wellness within your space, right? Within the work that you do?
That's a really great question, and I think my situation is a little different because I work alone. So it's difficult. It's difficult because if you don't really have people checking on you to see how you're doing. It's kind of just you notice your productivity, and that's how I notice things. So definitely the way I promote resilience is to be vulnerable and to let my community know that I may not be necessarily where I want to be, but I am trying and I'm getting there. So when we're specifically looking at even my work in food, just during the pandemic, a lot of people were struggling with their relationships with food. And sometimes there was pressure for me as a dietitian to have everything figured out. And that's not the reality. I'm a human being first, and I'm also trying to navigate what everyone is trying to navigate. So showing up and letting my community know I'm dealing with this and I'm working on it too, and I can support you as I learn. So that has been really, really an important piece for me around being resilient, just to be authentic and communicating. In addition to that, having that strong network of people. So a lot of my work is online, and even being able to cultivate relationships online has been a really powerful thing. I think social media can, have both its pros and cons, but being able to cultivate a community with people, like-minded people that you may have never met, has been really something that I've leaned into and has been amazing. In addition to that, strengthening the relationships that I do have with people that I can see has been really something that has helped me maintain my wellness and my resilience as well.
How do you think resiliency and wellness will look in this post-pandemic time that we're moving into? And how do you think we can prepare for these challenges, Rosie?
Great question. I think that, I would hope that people can recognize that resilience, like Dr. Spencer mentioned, requires that recovery as well.
Yeah.
I think that there is this idea, and going back to my work online, even when we're looking at self-care, we have all these different images of what self-care is, whether it's a bubble bath, where it's like a nice coffee, or it's candles. And sure, that could be great and all, but what are you really addressing what's going on inside? And I think I would hope that people lean into that more and to recognize it's not all about the aesthetic. It's really about how are you nurturing yourself from the inside, and how can you keep going? Because there will be times where you don't have bubble bath or you don't have a candle. And how are you ensuring that you are nurturing yourself? So I would hope that there would be more of a focus on that piece, and moving away from just how it looks, but to also how you feel inside.
I like that. So the cute little bubble bath pic is not going to cut it. Right? You got to be intentional with how you're feeding yourself, right? Yeah, I love that. What about you, Dr. Spencer? I know it sounds like you want to jump in. Go ahead.
Yeah. Can you tell? Because I kind of want to debunk this resiliency thing. I'm sorry.
Go for it.
For some reasons, for students of color, Black children, youth, who are kind of acculturated in a mindset and reality that you have to work 2 times as hard, 3 times as hard, 4 times as hard to make it. Like, parents drill this in. work hard, go and get all your degrees and stuff like that. And you go to the brutal system and you experience all types of inequities, but they're telling you work hard, work hard, work hard, work hard. And what I feel has become detrimental to our health, like our physical health, trying to maintain the sense of work hard, 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 be strong, 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 strong. And when things are happening, then students are not pursuing supports they need. I see it all the time. They're buckling under the pressure. Things are happening. Assignments are due. And there's all these resources we have on campus, and no one is accessing it. But I'm noticing other students are. And I think it has some cultural influences because we've always been programmed that we're strong, we can do it, and we are. But as I said, there has to be recovery. And the systems sometimes that we're working through are very violent to some individuals. And if you press at it with that intensity, without knowing sometimes when you do have to get the support, you need that extension, or you know what I mean? And then when you get into the career as well, there's a sense that you have to be manager within a year or so. I see that with millennials. And then what's happening is that they burn out when they get to that because they haven't been adequately prepared for what those leadership roles are. And I think that we have to begin to stop defining ourselves based on our careers.
Yeah.
Because we're in a capitalist system that's telling us that everything we are is our job, career, and we're drowning out our creativity, we're drowning out our passions and things that we love to do. And so I always encourage people now that do not let your job define you, to the point that the things that you love, they're nowhere in your lifestyle from day to day. And so it's that balance. And so it's knowing about, there used to be this song back in the day that said, I'm not your superwoman, in a different context. Anyone remembers that song? But that's how I'm trying to say it right now, because what the pandemic has showed us is that there are forces beyond our ability. Can anyone control a pandemic? Do you know what I'm saying? That's a force that we've all had to comply to, no matter how strong you were. Everyone gained some weight. Maybe not you, Rosie, because you're the dietitian on staff right now. Right? Because people
even making room for that too, because I think there is pressure for someone in like my position to not be human and to be superwoman and to be perfect. So yeah, it's interesting that you actually brought that up, because I was thinking about this yesterday and all the pressure that I'm feeling to appear a certain way, and even trying to navigate, why do I feel like this? And can I show up as myself? So just to add to that, because I think there is this expectation for us to be perfect. And especially if we're looking at it from an intersectional lens, Black women in particular. So this is something that I'm always having to work through myself, and to recognize that I'm a human being first. And it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to have challenges. It's okay to work towards your goals, but to also take time to reach them.
That's right.
And if I may, just quickly on a point that Dr. Spencer mentioned from the cultural point, I'm of African heritage, and I remember the first time I decided to take a mental health day, a sick day from work, the first ever, and my family called me. They're like, "Did you get hit by a bus? Are you dying? Is something the matter?" Because there's just like, there's no reason. Like, in all my 40 years, I have never taken a sick day. I'm like, I'm taking a sick day because you know what? I need to reset and check my mental health because I'm not okay. And so there is that added element. So that's why I was smiling when you brought that up, because it just brought back that memory. And since then, I've been fortunate to have mentors and leaders who care about mental health, who say it's okay to take a mental health day. And it's nothing to be ashamed about. And I've since learned to integrate that with my form of empowering and encouraging wellness in the workplace. So yes, very important point you raise.
Yeah.
I'm having two divided thoughts, because there's 2 points I really want to get to, and we'll see if I get there. So Ogo, you're talking about, you mentioned black tax, okay? And I didn't even know that there was a name to it. I know what you're talking about because I was told work hard, work hard, work hard. Dr. Spencer, you're talking about this rhetoric that is driven into us from like the time we're born, right? All the way up. But, if if you're saying, Dr. Spencer, if you're saying that we need to, in a sense, move away from it, and maybe I'm saying this wrong, but move away from it, what do you suggest instead?
Find out who you are and what your purposes are. It's not just your job. I've watched women, Black women, I talk Black because that's the lens of how my filter. So apply for a job 25 times and train people in the job and still not get it. And seeing her have mental breakdown on the job because she's so tied to that. But if she saw her brilliance as an orator, that maybe through community work or what have you, she would find that sense of purpose. And so we're being defined by getting it or not. And I'm like, do well in your career, pursue it. But you gotta have your passions to life. So for those who may have family, for an example, that's not everyone's situation, but like how are we with our, you know what I'm saying? In terms of where we get that sense of fulfillment, because at the end of the day, when you work long enough, you're going to realize how quickly they replace the worker. I always use the analogy of, I used to love Law and Order. It's a show, Law and Order. It's just come back. All right. But I used to watch it, and Stabler for me was the show. I said, when I heard, it was about 10 years ago, they wouldn't continue his contract for money. And I thought, the show is done. It will never recover. It was SVU. Didn't the show get better? This show torn up, you know what I'm saying? And then now 10 years, I see that they brought him back and there's a new show. My point is, they will replace us in a minute, and then we're the ones with the high blood pressure. We're the one with the diabetes and so forth, because of all this pent up trying to, I'm like, be well, do well, empower, go to school and all of it, but have something else that you're doing. Have your other passions, your family or this, or maybe you're a cycle fit instructor, whatever that is, you find it so that you have joy, not happiness, but joy, which for me are two distinct things, because the pandemic is showing us that the world of work is shifting and changing, and people are now putting demands on their wellness. Yes. Because now that our health was being interrupted, right? They're realizing that is the most important thing. And so that's for me. I'm not telling people to be lazy. I'm like, do all you can. But if those barriers show up, you're still going to thrive.
Absolutely.
You're still going to rise.
Absolutely.
You're unstoppable. That's how I believe it.
Thank you. Laura, go ahead and jump in.
I want to add to that, because even from a cultural perspective, there's a very real pressure. You know, when I show up in this space and I introduce myself, I tell you first my name, I announce where I'm from, my community, my First Nation. I tell you what city or town I represent. I share with you all of these roles that exist within my life as a wife, as an auntie, as a daughter, as a granddaughter. And what that also represents is I show up representing all of these people, and the pressure of that is very real. And I know those communities are broadened for other folks as well. But it's that need, like this, you know, my trauma response and understanding, you know, who I am in this workplace. You know, some of my common behaviors are perfectionism and people pleasing and feeling like I can never say no because that might deprive me of an opportunity down the road, and overworking and burnout. And that doesn't make me a better worker. That means that I have stuff that I need to work on. And I think that's what we have to stop glamorizing, is my responses to needing to be the first to break the, you know, being the first to have a master's in my family or even a university degree, needing to be the person to break this cycle of intergenerational trauma and substance use. You know, like there's so much that happens in our families, and then we show up in these organizations as overachievers and high performers and people pleasers to our detriment. Yeah. And I love what Dr. Spencer was saying about, you know, who am I beyond my career? I'm in my mid-30s and I still don't know. I've been at this a decade, and, you know, I work hard to build my career. I have 2 masters, and now I start my doctoral journey in the fall. And it's like my identity is so tied to my career and to academia that I don't know who I am beyond that. And so I share that very vulnerably, because it takes so long, you know, for me to undo all of those years of being told overachieve, you know, you need to achieve all of these milestones. I now, in my mid-30s, I'm a director of a program in this leading hospital, and I still can't get a handle on who I am outside of that. And so I think that for some of us, that's really normal. But I identify that as being so problematic, because even as I start my PhD in the fall, I keep thinking I'm going to find something in one of these academic pursuits, and guess what? I'm still trying to make meaning of this life and of all of these great experiences that I've had.
You are forcing me to do so much personal unpacking. That's what's happening right here. That is so good. I'm so grateful that when I was doing my MEd, I had a professor that said to me, this African woman, she said to me, Monique, put yourself at the center of your research, because it's what you're talking about, Laura. Like, who am I outside of these degrees? Who am I outside of this title? Who am I? Right? And I think we spend so much time being for other people, or being for that expectation that's been laid out from the beginning of time, that we haven't actually been able to get to know who we are, or even how we're evolving. Like, sometimes I think we even miss that, right? That's great. Thank you so much, Laura. Rosie, go ahead.
So I just wanted to add that something I've been thinking a lot about myself, and again, being online a lot, and how it's so easy to compare yourself to what other people are doing. I heard this quote before. It's like, we tend to overestimate what we can do in a year, but underestimate what we can do in 10. And I think that's something that I think people should think about, that you don't need to go fast, right? You know, you're still learning yourself. You're still learning what you like, what you don't like. And it can be really, really easy to get in the comparison trap. And then you end up trying to pursue something that you don't even actually want. So I would say that that's something, going back to, you know, tuning into your inner knowing and who you are, but also realizing that, you know, there's room for taking your time and having patience. And we tend to overestimate what we can do in a short amount of time versus a longer amount of time.
In other words, slow down.
Yeah.
Smell the roses. Absolutely. All right. So in 1 minute, like in 60 seconds, each person, if you can share, what advice do you have for people who want to, for example, our students, who want to build or strengthen resiliency in their career? 60 seconds each. I'm going to start with Rosie. You start.
Ooh, can I not start? I have to think about this.
All right. Go ahead, Ogo.
Don't be afraid to try, fail, and try again. And don't be afraid to embolden yourself. I remember when I was quitting government, again, African descent, you have a government job, you stay there for 40 years, collect your pension, and bounce. It wasn't for me. It was great, but I was deeply unhappy, and my mental health was deeply compromised. So I left, and I moved to Toronto. I moved back to Toronto. I was out west for a long time. I got a job, and then 6 months later, my biggest fear, they laid me off because they decided they no longer needed the role, just randomly. Huge fear, but I buckled down, and within 2 weeks, I got a new job, doing something completely different, a little bit out of my element, and it was probably the best thing that happened to me, because I opened myself up. I was fortunate; I was always open to trying new things. When I was in journalism school, the first thing my teacher said is, if you're not willing to move out of here, you're probably not going to be a practicing journalist. So a lot of my colleagues who stayed in Toronto ended up doing other things. I moved to Fort St. John, BC, which is close to Dawson Creek, not the TV show I made myself. But yeah, I was looking for Dawson Lurie everywhere. He not there. So, and only my mama came down to see me. And yeah, Fort St. John, no. But this was all important to my career, to finding myself, to developing myself as an individual, as a woman of color, and building that resiliency, and taking myself on this career journey. So be emboldened. Don't be afraid to try. Don't limit yourself to just, oh, I'm a communicator, or I'm a wellness advisor, or I'm a professor. I don't have anything beyond that scope. Try new things. Network yourself. Volunteer for different in different spaces, and learn all you can about yourself, and then grow from there.
Absolutely, I agree. Dr. Spencer, what advice do you have for people who want to build or strengthen resiliency in their career? You got to unmute yourself.
Sorry about that. I lost the screen. My apologies. My advice would be is for people to, one thing I find very important in terms of success in career is have good friends and relationships. Build your relationships, because you'll find that leaders or people who end up moving through the ranks often, it's not their PhDs, masters, or bachelors. You will find that out. And sometimes to your dismay, it's not what you think, what people, right? But relationships, the networks that you make, and have a really good foundation with that, I would say, is spend time learning your craft. I feel like sometimes throughout the careers, there's such a push to rise, rise, rise. And then we don't become good leaders because we haven't developed ourselves in the craft. You got to know the work. You got to know your expertise, what you're being trained in. Learn it before you're so fast to accelerate, because that's what society's telling you to do, right? Know your craft. And I mean, like even in the field of social worker in which I teach, because it could be detrimental to other people's lives if you don't do that type of work, right? So take your time and love life, because the rat race of the career, 10, 15 years in, you're going to be like, I wish I did this. I wish, but now we're telling you, no, enjoy it now. Learn your craft, have good relationships, move beyond happiness. Why do I say that? Is happiness bad? Absolutely not, right? Because happiness is like, it's that emotional state, you know, feeling content, positive emotions, but then comes the pandemic that will kind of impact our happiness. But joy is limitless. It's life defining, it's transformative, and it's also a choice. And so no matter what life hits you, no matter the color of your skin or your gender, what have you, the joy is going to let you know that no matter what, I'm going to be successful. Why? Because this is who I'm mirroring, what I want others to be by leading. So make your history. And don't be so hard on yourself. Learn your craft, have good relationships, and the sky's the limit.
Thank you so much. Very quickly, Laura, what advice do you have for people who want to build or strengthen resiliency in their career?
Oh, I think one of my biggest lessons has been not to underestimate what stress will do to your body and wellness. Stress is so destructive to your well-being, so take good care of you always with daily practice. I think the other thing is don't break promises to yourself. Schedule time to really take care of you. I think we also have a responsibility to show up in spaces for ourselves, but also for one another, to show up with more kindness and more compassion and more empathy, especially as we move out of this pandemic. And the last thing I'll say is stay authentic. You know, be sure that your actions and the decisions you're making are always congruent with your values and goals. Don't compromise that. And I would say, you know your worth and negotiate your worth, and then add 10% or 20%, because I think what's so unfortunate, especially as you're coming out as new grads, is sometimes that's recognized that you're a new grad without taking into consideration your life experience and the things that you've done outside of academia that make you who you are. And so negotiate that worth, because once you enter the doors of any company or agency or so on and so forth, you know, that first point of contact really is your opportunity to negotiate who you are and the value that you bring to any organization. So don't underestimate how important that is. Much.
Know your worth, negotiate your worth. I love it. I love it. Rosie, take us out. What advice do you have?
So I would say don't lose sight of who you are and why you do what you do. Essentially, don't forget about your why.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Ladies, thank you so much. It's been great facilitating this conversation. I can't wait to go a little bit deeper in our Q&A period. So I want to pass things over to Amber Bin. Thank you so much, ladies.
It's always with this mute button. I'm always having struggles with it, but oh my goodness. Thank you so much for the panelists for sharing all your experiences and emphasizing the importance of career resiliency. And thank you so much, Monique, for being such a great moderator. I was almost, this was so inspirational. I was almost to tears, and just how amazing everything that you've shared. And these were such, moving conversations. And all of you have touched on so many important parts about resiliency and showing that self-care is so important, mental health, and having those boundaries and really putting yourself first. So thank you so much. Yes, we're going to move on to the Q&A portion of this. So we are not done yet. We're going to do this until about 5:25. So now I open up to the audience for you to ask your questions. And to ask these, there is the reaction button to raise your hand. So I can go to you for you to unmute yourself during that time, ask your question. And you can also put the question in the chat as well. And the panelists will have the chance to answer those for you. So go right ahead. Okay, I think to start off, oh, wait, we see a hand. I will go to the hand. Give me a second. So Luke, go right ahead.
Hi there. Is it okay if I ask with the audio, or would you prefer chat?
Audio is great as well.
Okay, great. I just wanted to say thanks everybody for sharing their stories. They were fantastic and just very inspirational and harrowing to hear. And I mean that in a good way. I know harrowing can be kind of a, dismal word, but I meant this as a, great inspirational thing. I was curious if you had any insights into how to let go of maybe traumas and other mental cycles that some of these hardships have caused you before. Like, do you have any maybe daily? I think Laura mentioned daily rituals. Do you have any daily rituals involved in how we can go about cleansing ourselves of some of the traumas that we've experienced?
Sure, that's a really great question. Thank you. For me, it's been about, like I said, I've experienced burnout a couple of times in my career, and I mean really, disruptive burnout that really felt like my entire kind of foundation and strength was kind of taken from me. And that's when I really had to keep it in check. And, I had a really wise counselor, and she was an older woman, and she said to me in her, really abrupt way, she said, "Why do you do damage to your body for 50 weeks of the year and think of 2 weeks of vacation is going to magically undo everything?" And so really early on, she taught me, really important strategies on, our holidays are not meant to be used to recover. They're meant to be used to experience more joy in the people and the things that we love doing outside of work. And I think that that was one of the biggest pieces of advice that I appreciated so early in my career. And then as I worked through my stuff, I saw how much more I had to work through, and I had to really hold myself accountable to doing that work so that I could be a better employee and just a better partner in life to all of those around me. And so for me, it's been simple things. I smudge every morning. I meditate every morning. And that sounds like the most cliche thing when we talk about self-care, but I really feel grounded in starting my day. And then when I notice that I start to get really irritable, or I just don't have patience, or I find that I'm reacting to things in a way that is, not my norm, I'm very in tune with what my norm is. I then go back to ceremony. I go back to those elders and to the lodges where I really need to do that work. And I would like to get to a place that I'm not doing that out of being reactive, but that it's just part of my regular maintenance. And so I think it's about surrounding yourself with people who are going to love you in wellness and hold you accountable when you're not in that best place.
That was great. Thank you so much for sharing. Would any of the other panelists want to answer that question?
I wanted to say that to what Luke was saying, there's degrees of what we're talking about here. It's with trauma. It sounds like that's what he was saying, and your use of language about cleansing. And I think because, trauma looks very different to different people, right? We're talking about negative experiences that really deeply affects a person, incidences that have happened in people's lives that are deeply unsettling. So it really makes it hard to cope with like normal stresses of life. And I would really encourage you or anyone else is hearing us, if there's trauma, whether it's childhood or things that have happened, that you do seek help and support through counseling. And I know a lot of the schools, I'm sure it's Seneca or Humber, they have those type of resources for students to access, because that has to be dealt with in a way that professionals can do, if that's what we're talking about. So I would really, really encourage that through most of the tuitions at all universities, colleges, so forth, have these type of supports in place for students to seek that out. And I think even more so, what is happening? Sorry, there's echo happening. I'm not sure what happened.
There's someone who has maybe there's feedback coming from someone else. So if everyone can mute themselves, so Dr. Lee Brown Spencer can speak. But try it now.
Yeah. Okay, I think it's gone. So hopefully, Luke, you can, access those resources that would be offered through your institution, your school institution.
Thank you so much. Yes, accessing resources and support is so important, and really knowing that recovery is not just within those 2 weeks; it's continuous and throughout your entire journey. Okay, so I see a question in the chat from Carol. Can you please identify organizations or people in the community that can provide support and counsel in career resiliency specific to an individual's needs? Anyone want to answer that question?
I guess I can jump in. It depends what community you live in as well, whereabouts, but there are several organizations that focus on career development and career building and resiliency. But what I would recommend is you have 4 panelists here who have spoken to you for the last hour about it. Feel free to look up any of us on LinkedIn. Give us time, because we also are taking care of our mental health. We don't get back to you right away, but feel free to reach out. That's something I started doing a while back, is taking a look at, again, LinkedIn or social media, and finding people who could be potential mentors who are in positions that I hoped and aspired towards, and reaching out to them. And surprisingly, I heard back from about 95% of them. And they were a wealth of information, and many of them are still my mentors today. So don't be afraid to reach out to those specific people in positions that you aspire towards, and ask them about their path and how they went about it. And if they don't know, they surely know someone to point you to. And again, you have us here. Feel free to reach out.
Thank you.
Can I just add a bit to that, actually? And I would just say that when you are reaching out, it would be great if you were kind of specific about your asks, because I do think it can be quite overwhelming receiving messages. Of course, you want to support and you want to be helpful, but sometimes there are a lot of people reaching out. So if you maybe can show that you've maybe done your research on the individual and know a little bit about them, I think that can help you get a response as well.
Thank you. Okay, I am going to go. I see a hand raised in the chat. Let me just see over here. Where is it? Okay, so I have Sumangala, I hope I pronounced that properly. You can go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you all for the chat and the discussion. It was awesome. I am a mid-career registered nurse, felt a lot of burnout in my 10 years of nursing. I am currently doing teaching as a part-time, and I just feel rejuvenated and rejoiced. So it's going great. But my question specifically for the panelists are, have you had moments in time where you've had to leave a job because no matter how much you've tried to correct those mistakes or see the changes you want to see are not occurring, and so the only choice you really have is to leave? How do you cope with that sadness and grief because of all the time and effort you spent in that workspace, contributing and making change? So have you experienced anything like it, and how have you coped with it?
I can share an experience. I've been really fortunate in my career to spend a lot of time in program development, being asked to start or to lead really incredible initiatives from the ground and from those initial engagement and planning phases. And that's been a great honor in the decade of my career. And I remember in one particular instance, there was a massive project. It was a lot of fundraising. And I was, starting to feel like the tokenized Indigenous face of the organization as we're seeking funds and really trying to build these partnerships in the community. And, my messaging around your actions being really congruent with your values really stems from that, because I felt that who I was and what my beliefs were being compromised. I felt that the way in which folks were asking me to engage with the Indigenous community was not in line with my practices and the way in which I feel was respectful and reciprocal in nature. And so it broke my heart. We were in the middle of a really big project and I had to step away. And what I learned through that is ego. Like ego really does get in the way of sometimes some really good progress. And I just had to understand that there was a lot of ego involved, and I wasn't there for those reasons. And so I took that experience elsewhere, and I'm really grateful that I did, because many wonderful things have come, and the project that I left behind ended up being, a flourishing success. But I didn't need to see that through. I knew my truth, and I took the time to obviously grieve that and stay connected with the people who were doing good work. But I had to separate myself from the institution.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Would any of the panelists want to add on to that, or answer the question as well? Okay.
Can I add actually?
Of course.
I'm new in my career, I should say, but I've been in positions where I had to really reflect on if the work that I was doing was in alignment with who I am. And something that I had to remember and kind of coach myself on was that you can still do the work that you want to do, but you don't need to be in that space. So that's something that really helped me leave situations that just weren't in alignment, just knowing that I could still show up, serve the people that I wanted to serve, but it didn't have to look like that. So I think having that and just knowing that there are other opportunities to do the work that you want to do can help you through grieving that.
That was great.
I would just say that it's a process. It's literally it's a loss. And so you kind of have to look at it in terms of the stages of grief. I think it was Samigala. It's a loss, especially when you've invested so much of your time. It may make you cry. It may make you feel like, did I make the right decision? You probably will be shocked to not, like, did I really do that? And then that pain and that guilt, the stages of grief, the anger, for some people, even the depression. And then it's eventually going to get to that point of the acceptance and the hope. Because for you to have gone to that and make such a radical decision, there's something better ahead. Like, go through the stages. Don't second guess yourself. Rally around yourself of people who know your worth and the brilliance that you bring to this world as a nurse, And when you get to that acceptance and hope stage, watch out, because you're going to know exactly what you're supposed to be doing. So I wish you all the best and well with that.
Thank you so much. It's really about always knowing your worth, for sure. So we have 1 minute left of our Q&A period. I'm going to go to one last question that is in the chat, and then we will move on to Leanna's component. So one other question that I do have is, any advice for students who are unsure of their career direction, trying to balance what they want for themselves versus what their family community wants for them?
That's such a good question. Loaded question. So many ways to answer this, because you'll find as you get older, you become more radical and you're just like, this is my life and I need to do with it what I want. Again, I'm of African descent. I don't know if that carries any meaning with everyone, but it's basically like, okay, you're done high school, you're going to be a doctor, lawyer, engineer, accountant, or like, I think there's one more. I'm like, no, I'm going to be a communicator. What does that mean? Right. But I think I was fortunate to come from a more liberal minded family who was still very much traditional, but let me explore a bit. And I also took courses that, like, I took astronomy and I failed it miserably. Like, they wanted me to go measure stars in the middle of the night and bury. I'm like, no, that's not for me. It wasn't what I thought it would be about. But I took courses that challenged me, that expanded my scope while still trying to find my balance and understand who I was and what I wanted to do. I graduated with a sociology degree in commerce, but at that time I wanted to be a journalist. And then now I'm doing sociology and DEI work. So at some point in time, some conversations need to be had with your family and community, and appreciate the support, but also enable you the space to kind of explore and figure out who you are. And really, at the end of the day, you'll find out that that's what they want for you. They want you to figure out who you are and where your strengths are. And one more thing I'll mention, I don't know if it's relevant to you, but I waited 10 years to do my master's because I was like, I've done school, I've done what the family wanted somewhat. If I'm going back to academia, I want to make sure it's on my own terms and it's doing what I want. And that was probably the best decision I made. I went into the workforce, got the experience. And then at that point, when I was paying for it and pursuing the degree that I wanted, it was so much more worth it. And I worked twice or 10 times as hard because it's like, yes, this is what I want to do. I don't know if that provides any context. I feel like I just tried to do and help your question, but expand and explore yourself. That's what university is about. Take courses, different courses that you can. Check out different networks. I think they have a lot of student unions, student clubs and stuff. Diversify yourself, because that's how you learn who you are and where you want to go eventually.
Thank you so much. That was great. And I wish that we could ask more questions and answer more questions. But I'm going to pass it on to Leanna now. And she will be doing a draw for a gift card. So I'm going to pass it on to you, Leanna. Thank you once again, panelists. This was